This is the Accelerate Public Service Delivery with Service Pattern workshop. And Laurence, Tati, and me, Stefan, are very happy to have you here today and to tell you a little bit about what brought us here. GovStack. How many of you have heard of GovStack? Show of hands.
Or three.
Shall we raise hands as well?
Yeah.
Okay, we bumped it up, doubled the number.
So you're already like a very small percentage of humanity who heard about it. GovStack is an initiative of like a community of practice founded by United Nations and its ITU, the Germany, Estonia, and the Digital Impact Alliance. And its goal is to provide, let's say, digitalization blueprint from A to Z for governments on all levels wishing to digitalize public services. This is basically what its mission and vision is. You can also find it online. This is a global toolbox for e-government. And part of the toolbox, of course, is you have like data storage, data manipulation, data exchange between agencies, how it works on the service provider side, security, and all of that. But you also kind of have design in it, and I will come to this in a second. Building blocks are the one thing you can take away from the GovStack concept. So you can imagine it as like IKEA furniture or a bunch of Legos, like a set of Lego blocks. No matter what you want to build, you have something you can build it with. So be it like a web page or an app, be it like a way to store data, build workflows, whatever you want to do on every government level, GovStack provides exactly the blueprints on how you do it. So not the software itself, like you go to vendors, you buy software, you design your software, but we provide the blueprint for it. And here we are. The three people standing here in front of you are leads of GovStack's UX UI working group. And our goal is, as you can see, to create those Lego blocks for service designers and for teams working on building digital services worldwide who don't have designers in teams or who don't have much resources at all. And we take good examples from around the world that are proven to work, that are efficient and user-friendly, and we document them and let everybody else use that. We have a big community of practice. I think this map can light up a little more. I think it's not probably totally up to date, but we have 60 or 70 contributors all in our group, and we're happy to see it grow, and hopefully with some of you today or after today. What's the UX UI working group doing? We basically do two things. So these are like, you can think of them as two ways or two tiers of participating. So we test the content that you already have, meaning the patterns that are documented on GovStack's website, and we test them against real-world scenarios. So for example, someone in, let's say, Togo is building an app for the government that will help agricultural producers, I don't know, manage crop yields, have better weather predictions, things like that. And they go to our database of service patterns and user flow patterns, and they say like, oh, okay, I think that this one will work or this one will work, and they test it, and they come back to us and say, sorry, we were missing there something, or it worked as well, and that's Cypress. Those who want to go a little bit, let's engage more on this creative side of GovStack can join and develop new patterns. This means you will be writing documentation about new patterns that appear. We heard yesterday, I'm so happy to have you here. We heard yesterday that Italian service designers identified more than 80 patterns actually during the course of your work on the EU app, which is amazing. Of course, if you want to dive deeper, you're going to write documentation, you're going to play a little bit with some low to mid fidelity Figma mockups. So we're not doing anything akin to like designing systems, designing components, branding stuff. Nothing of sorts. Like we leave this to people who are actually owners of the whole project. But we can provide patterns, and visual patterns are better than textual ones. That's for sure. And what are service patterns at all, and why do we need them? This is something that Betty and Laurence will tell you more about.
Okay, so I just want to share a little bit of inspiration, I suppose, because Betty's going to talk about this a little bit more, but service patterns, as you know, is nothing new. I wanted to share this book. It's kind of like a little Bible on patterns, but it's architectural patterns. It's actually printed on very thin, like Bible paper. So I think it has about 250 patterns in here. And the interesting thing I found from this was we spent a lot of time thinking about how do you define a pattern? Is there a service pattern and a sub pattern, and then templates that are used within it? And templates, we've got those kind of on the table. And this book really just has them ordered from big to small, so high level to kind of the minutiae really. And what I'm showing here on the screen is a pattern might be, how do you create a village or a town with a mosaic of subcultures? So it talks about what does that actually mean, but they're very short. And some other examples might go into the kind of mid-level. So this is, how do you create spaces where people feel comfortable to sleep in public, which is interesting. Or going down to the minutiae, like I said, paving with cracks between stones. And like some of this is only like a one-page pattern. But the interesting thing is there is no real structure other than big to small. Each page has kind of a paragraph at the end that just summarizes how you use different patterns to make up this pattern. So they're always being combined and reused. And it's a really interesting book. It's called A Pattern Language. And it's a bit of our inspiration for how can we do this project in a really simple way. It's really creating a language to talk about what constraints do you need to think about when you're designing a certain user flow or a certain problem, rather than what you might see here is like UI patterns and things like that. So we really want to try and explore what would a service pattern card look like that doesn't show a UI or doesn't show anything like that. I'll pass back to Betty.
All right. So I'm going to talk about probably a brief history of service patterns, or how or what actually other people have done about service patterns. And that's because service patterns are actually not anything new. People have done it. Probably you've used them, you've created them, probably just call them something different. So a good starting point to talk about is, so back in 2015, so that's about 10 years ago now. So Lou Down, she was they were the director of design in the UK government. So they explained this concept of how service patterns could be used as a tool for delivering public services. And so it can be used as a guide to create common types of services. So we also have more examples. So much later in 2017, so the concept of service patterns was explored even more. So by the Essex County Council, with the help of FutureGov. FutureGov was a design consulting firm. And so at FutureGov, they explored more than 150 different services that were being delivered by Essex County Council. And they looked at what are the common user flows, what are the common steps, and delivered this into some common patterns that are still being used today as a tool to enable different county councils to kickstart the delivery or even design of their digital services. And then we have a look at also an example of how service patterns have also been used in the private sector. So this is the BT Group or EE. So they've been so Jeanette Clement has been documenting how they've developed service patterns, how they've used service patterns since 2022, and very recently she's also published a blog about how they've delivered some results of using service patterns. And so how this looked like is that, so they realized that, so for different products within BT, so for example, so they're having different products and they have common services within that they're delivering for these different products. For example, managing an account. And every time you try to manage accounts for your users for these different products, since you have different teams working in these different products, delivering the same typical kind of a service, but doing it differently each and every time. because these are different groups, right, within the organization. So what's the point of doing that? How about looking at, so what is the commonality of delivering this particular service within that product and documenting that and reusing that over time? And then that means saving time spent by the designers to do this thing all over again, sort of like reinventing the wheel all the time. And also meaning that you're able to carry on good practices, you're able to be consistent in terms of the end user experience, consistent in terms of accessibility. And recently, so this is the MOJ within the UK government. They've recently, actually about a month ago, they've published their first a prototype of the apply service patterns. And it's interesting to look at all these different types of work because you can see what kind of content different people are including in the documentation of service patterns. Yeah, so this is just showing what has been done. We also talk a bit more about what we've done within GovStack. Another good thing that I would like to reference is about, so in 2018, some designers, just to mention them, so Kaydale, Ignacia, so these are service designers as well who are in the GDS UK government as well. So they published some principles that we can look at that could help us when we're developing service patterns. So these include, for example, putting users first, which is not anything new, I'm sure, for anyone in this room today. And different things like being flexible, responding to common end user needs. And one very important one for us is so being collaborative in the way that we provide a common language. So that's important for us in terms of GovStack because so GovStack, we're looking at service patterns in a global context. And like Stefan mentioned, the working group is made up of different people, different experts globally. And it's that coming together and volunteering and sharing our experiences in different products and services in our different contexts, different countries. That's what enables us to look at, okay, so what's common? How can we leverage on the best practices in delivering different services? Yeah, so this is just an example of those principles when you're delivering service patterns. So now I'm going to look at the next thing, which is, so what is this service pattern? How can we even define it? Because we've talked a lot about what has been going on around it, but what is it really? And so how we define service patterns for us is that, so service patterns are the reusable parts of a service that can be pieced together to build the end-to-end user experience or user journey. And so service patterns, they act as templates. So they're templates to kickstart the design of services. So instead of, again, reinventing the wheel or thinking, what should I consider, what is most accessible, what exists out there for something similar that has been delivered in a different context, what can I learn from them? So service patterns enables us to do that. So to dive a bit deeper, what we mean then is that, so in this diagram, at the top level, so that's where you have your end-to-end service. So for example, applying for a construction permit or applying for a business license. And then the next level, so when in that end-to-end journey, so you have bits and pieces of user flow. So for example, when you're going to apply for a business license or a construction permit, you need to find the service in the first place. Probably you need to check eligibility. Probably you need to, then government will ask you for information. Probably you need to pay for that service and you need some communication. You need to know whether you've been successful or not. So those bits and parts, that's what we call the service pattern. So for example, find the service, check eligibility. And if I'm thinking about a different service, probably pay for a parking fee, I might find a service and probably pay and the outcome, right? So these are the bits. So this is what we're calling the reusable parts that you might want to pick and piece together for the service that you're delivering. And then the next level is the steps. So for example, within find a service, what might you find within that level? So this is like a deeper dive. So within find a service, probably you'll have a service catalog, and that could be a page template for that. And then if it's a service that has an offline journey as well, that could mean a service center, or again, digitally, that could mean a conversational UI. So that's the steps. And it's very important for me to mention that within the GovStack context, in the steps part, this is a step. So this would look like page templates probably, or even guidance for what you'd have on your page layout, probably guidance on these are the components that you would include. These are the bits and pieces. that you would include. But then for GovStack purposes, we're not getting into the level of then these are the detailed components. For example, these are the buttons and the variations for the buttons, color, typography, and all that. So we think that that level of detail can be included in design systems. Like yesterday, we had a lot about the Netherlands design system and different design systems in Europe. So that's where you'll find that detail. So at this point, we're just thinking about end-to-end services. So we have the service patterns and the steps. And so I'll talk about what we've done with what you'll find on the GovStack, what we delivered in the first proof of concept. So we have the good practice service design guidelines. So these are just guidelines on delivery of good services. And why we thought this was important is because so GovStack country partners, we are working in different global contexts. Some teams have probably the idea of service designing or user-centered design is completely new to them. Then these guidelines would assist that. So these are guidelines about user-centered design, so accessibility and inclusion, consistency, technology choices, and so on. And when we were creating these guidelines, we were really as well inspired and looked to other published standards. So these would include, for example, the ISO 25500, UK service guidance, service standard and service manual as well. We looked at Dubai's Smart City Excellence Delivery Model. We looked at OECD good practice principles. And then we've also now documented the service patterns. At the moment, you'll find a different structure from what I shared here. And this is why we also have the working group, because we've been learning over time. We are actually in the phase where we really want to test these patterns and iterate them. So our thinking has evolved. So at that time, when we published this proof of concept 2 years ago, end of 2023, I believe, we had the idea that we can have patterns and then sub-patterns and steps. But over time, we've evolved to see that for the global context that GovStack is operating in, what's efficient is to have the service patterns and the steps. So in this documentation, we've put together different different service patterns. Yeah, so you'll see that we have the user flows and the different service patterns. For example, register, authenticate, asking users for feedback. And then what we have is the page templates. And then the page templates are specifically for what would apply for each user flow. And that's what we'll have a look in more detail in the activity that we'll be doing. So for now, I'm going to hand over to Laurence to talk about, so I've explained what service patterns is about, but then how do we practically use this tool to enable a design and delivery of services in the context of organizations and the context of our roles, as a designer, as a product manager or whatever. How would you then use this tool? So Laurence.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Betty. And yeah, a lot of the stuff that you can see on the website at the moment in the documentation is from our kind of proof of concept, which we're testing as a concept, but we also have the develop patterns. So afterwards, if you want to have a look, here's this is a draft document for a service catalog, things to think about. So it has some extra detail, like what kind of metadata might you need to structure in a service register, or options for different types of taxonomies and things like that. So we're really trying to take it to the next level now. But yeah, service patterns can be used as a tool at organizational level, as well as from a design level. So it can be a strategic asset, I suppose, or I guess from an organization, we want to keep services consistent, or we want to deliver them efficiently. And I want to talk a little bit about a couple of examples. So which example should I look at? We've been working on a project or collaborating with the EU Commission, who are rolling out a service they're rolling out a legislation that's going to apply to different EU countries. So example of service patterns there is they would like to have kind of guidance for how do you implement this service, but they don't want to tell each country this is what it should look like or exactly how it works. So it's basically, we keep saying kickstarting, but it's just kickstarting that design process, giving people something they can prototype quickly and then developing based on their own needs. I'm going to just jump into one example from someone from our working group. So I'm going to talk about very briefly about Japan Digital Agency's pattern spotting process. So I met with the team recently, and they told me how they've developed an approach for identifying and applying service patterns through their kind of assurance process, which was really interesting. So we're keen to learn from different organizations and kind of share how are you using service patterns? How do you define them? So really interested to hear from the service designers in Italy for sure. Yeah, so as they review projects across government, they collect and analyze these common user flows, user journeys, and they document this into a Notion. They create kind of a knowledge base of all the services they're looking at, because the digital agency in Japan is like a central kind of government digital service type agency. They then use those to draft a kind of template pattern, and they test that internally on an internal service. And then they have ambitions to then start rolling those out to different sectors within the government. So I think they talked a little bit about how this could help them scale up delivering redesigning the healthcare services. Actually, I want to mention, they talked a lot about a system of systems. So there's a system of building blocks for digital government, and they see service patterns as one of those kind of building blocks alongside procurement, alongside standards and things like that. So I just want to show you this picture because their office is so nice. They have a whole wall that goes, I don't know, it's the whole wall of the building, and it's just design books, which is really interesting.
You should go to the Ministry of Interior and check there. I've never seen so much paper in my life. Average desk is 60 with a hub, with a desktop computer, and then they had rolling filing cabinets.
Where's that?
Tokyo, Ministry of Interior.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the digital agency have a shiny new office, and it's not like that, but they do have, it's all kind of grass and pallets that you can rearrange into furniture. It's very fun, but I just love how they're very design centric and inspired by, there's books on architecture and things like that. They're taking influence from all over, from different disciplines, which is great. So I've just talked about, they make use of their existing assurance processes, they develop and test template patterns, and then they scale that to, or their ambition is to scale that to broader systems. So that's like how it could be a tool for an organization. So if you're thinking, how can I apply this in an organization? I'm working on a project where they're developing a service manual, and they're wondering whether that patterns could be something that they can provide for suppliers who are building government services. But yeah, it's also a tool for designers, for us. So I think if you go onto the gov.uk design system, for example, there's a tab on patterns, so it's common user flows. So, you know, how to start using a service, for example, it will say there's a start page, there's a before you start content, blah, blah, blah. So it can be included into design systems. The guidance can also be used to kind of inform policies and service delivery. And it can support in writing kind of procurement opportunities and things like that, and making sure you can communicate what you need from suppliers. We've talked a lot about GovStack being these building blocks for government, but it sits around those kind of good service design processes as well. I think it's worth pointing out. So it's not just take it off the shelf and deliver that service. It's about having an implementation team and testing that with users and just using it as a starting point. So yeah, here's an example. It could be used as a kind of backbone for service blueprinting. So this is an example from a project within GovStack. They just drag and drop the steps they think they need. So it means, okay, they don't necessarily have to think too much about what kind of content do they need to put on a start page for a service. We're not starting from scratch each time. We also tried to see if, like, we've been using it as a prototyping tool. So could we have all the patterns as components in Figma, and you just drop them into a kind of low fidelity flow, and maybe you could just swap them for a high fidelity that you can quickly test and just change the content out. So we're looking at, this was used in the Women in GovTech challenge, which there was a few hundred participants in that. So they were testing this and using it to help quickly prototype. And these are people who are new to using design and prototyping and things like that. Oh, okay. So yeah, there's lots of stuff on the table. So this is a bit of an experiment for us. We thought we could design a kind of activity. I know we can't all get around table. Maybe we'll see how it works. But activity to try and explore some of these patterns, interrogate them, and kind of get a bit of feedback as well. We're not precious about any of this stuff. And like I said, a lot of it's very proof of concept. So we thought we'd give everybody 5 or 10 minutes to kind of look at what we have on the table, maybe explore the guidance. We've gone a bit crazy with the QR codes. So I'll show you an example in a minute, but on the front of each step, there's a QR code that takes you to the kind of guidance page for that. On the back, this one takes you to the kind of whole set of guidance where you can start to explore the actual patterns. Yeah, so a bit of time to explore. Maybe we could kind of map a journey. So we've got an example here, apply for a construction permit. We've been defaulting to that a lot in the pilot version or in this proof of concept. And see what's missing. We've got post-it notes. You can put a step that's missing that you think is important. So together in these 4 groups, which might be ambitious, we might move some people over here. We'll map a very simple journey. If we have time, or if you want to, you can have a look at drafting a new step. It says pattern, but it's more like a step. So this template here that we have, the big A3 one, just is a kind of conversation prompt. So each section of that is a conversation you can have in your team. Okay, what's important on a start page? What problem is this solving? What are the other prompts? Yeah, what things do you need to consider when you're implementing this pattern? And then maybe if we've got time, it would be cool to do a bit of a playback. If you're not feeling workshop-y at the moment, that's totally fine. We can also chat on the side, or you can go get more coffee, because I hate to force a workshop on people. But yeah, so
The guidance.
yeah.
I think that given the number of participants that we had, if we're so lucky, maybe we can like all stand up and converge around like 4 groups around the tables, because I see that many people don't have a place at a table.
Yeah.
So maybe we do it like in a stand-up fashion, right? Like just important we have like 4